Hi, my name is Barb Smith. Welcome to Find My Team Conversations. We have a great topic for you tonight, and we have a great guest who's actually in the space and is going to be able to answer all of these questions that you sent in early. Why this topic is interesting is because right now, around the country, hundreds of student athletes are making their way around the country visiting college campuses. And some of you might be visiting unofficially, and some of you might be visiting officially. Unofficially means you pay and your family pays for everything. Officially means you've been invited and the college pays. But either way, no matter which one you're on, it really doesn't matter because you're trying to find out information about the colleges that will best suit your situation. So we have a person tonight who actually researches the intersection between higher education and athletics. So she's the perfect person to answer these questions and help us, especially female student athletes and parents of female student athletes, um, come up with what to ask, how to find these things out, how to find out the truth, and what really does matter in terms of a college experience. So I want to introduce Karen Weaver. Welcome, Karen. But before you talk, I'm going to introduce you. She graduated with distinction at the University of Pennsylvania. Karen coached field hockey at The Ohio State University and Salisbury University. She was director of athletics at Cecil College and then associate AD at the University of Minnesota, which was where we met and were able to work together for a couple years. And then she went on to Penn State University, Abington. Karen is a color analyst for field hockey for CBS, the Big Ten Network, the Big East Conference, and ESPN. She was an associate professor at Drexel University, working with sports management. She's also a media researcher for the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics, dealing with orchestrating media deals in NCAA Division I conferences. I bet that is a ton of fun. She's also authored a book that is hopefully going to come out soon. We talked about this beforehand, and it's titled Sports Finance. And she's a podcaster. And I'm putting the link to the podcast in the chat if you want to take that and listen to some of these podcasts because they're excellent. I've heard several of them. The podcast is called Trustees and Presidents, Managing Intercollegiate Athletics. And there's a lot of information in there about college athletics that will be interesting. Karen is a contributing writer for Forbes, covering the intersection of college sports and higher education. She's a graduate faculty and academic director at the University of Pennsylvania. And her research has led her not just to our show, but to major podcasts and shows, and you've spoken on this. So very excited to have Karen here. Thank you so much for giving us the time. And can you give us a fun fact before you have any opening words?
A fun fact about college athletics, or what are you thinking?
Or about you, a fun fact about you.
Fun fact, I am secretly a animal lover. I just love cats and dogs and everything else. So there you go.
Awesome. Awesome. And I understand they could be visiting our show as well. So
They
that's
might be.
So, okay, the way this works is if you have a question, put it in the Q&A section or the chat. They're both down there below. And we've got questions here that have come in early. And if you have a question during the conversation here, please send it through and I'll just keep track of that and we'll fire away here at Karen, our expert. I'm so excited. There's so many good topics that we could shoot off of this particular topic. So we'll kind of go with the flow of the conversation, but get most of these questions answered. There are quite a few. So Karen, I'm going to start with just the first question that we have here, which is, this is a parent. I'm interested in knowing what these main things are that we should know before our daughter commits.
Okay, so are we assuming that this daughter is in 9th or 10th grade or 11th or 12th grade? Where are we placing her in the process?
Well, let's place her as a junior or senior, and,
Okay.
and let's say maybe they've done some research on it. And if that's not the case, then shoot something through the chat, and we'll adjust.
Okay, so I think when you're in your 11th grade year and certainly your 12th grade year, for a lot of parents, they'll probably feel like it's too late, but it's not. It's really important for you to spend time thinking about what you want out of your college experience in terms of not only academics, and we'll go into more detail about that, but also in terms of your time commitment and how much you want to invest in one particular sport. I've talked to enough parents now who realize that their daughters are multiple sport talented athletes, and they go to college sometimes and they forget that at some levels you can still pursue that multiple sport idea and having different teammates and different seasons. So just having that talk with yourself about what am I really willing to sacrifice, but also what do I want to get out of my experience? Do I want to play one season a year and have the rest of the year off? Do I want to play 2 seasons a year? Do I want to play one sport across multiple years, multiple seasons, like basketball or swimming? So think about what you want from that athletic experience. That will help you define what level you're going to start targeting your interests in. I'll give you a couple of examples from my coaching career. So I would, when I was coaching in Division III, I was oftentimes coming across talent that was clearly Division I talent, and they would go and accept a scholarship to go play somewhere, and they just didn't like how much time they were investing in something that wasn't giving them a lot back. So they ended up transferring to a Division III school because they felt like they could have more of a student experience, right? Kind of hang out with their friends, maybe go to the beach for the weekend. And so they felt like they were getting a more well-rounded experience. And even as a Division I head coach, I saw that from my athletes. I saw that by the time our sport, field hockey, was a fall sport, by the time you get to April, they're about ready to be done with the sport, yet you're still, the NCAA sets you up to still have those practices, and coaches would probably lose their job if they didn't have all those practices. So it's really important to set yourself up for what you expect in terms of your competitive time and also in terms of your let's be a college student time.
I think that's so important because what we try to do at Find My Team is get people to start earlier. So to find out the things that you're talking about, if you can start visiting, as a student athlete, if you can start visiting campuses early, like freshman and sophomore years, and try to get a feel and go watch practices and understand the seasons, how you're describing the seasons, it might help you make decisions later and even weed some schools out before you even get to the most serious part of your recruiting journey. So yeah, it's good to know that stuff and to be prepared to find out about it.
One other thing I want to add, in the NCAA world, the Division III competitive and off-season length of time is 18 weeks. So over a 30-week academic calendar, 18 weeks, the coach can ask you to engage in some sort of team competitive activity or practice. In Division I, it's 22 weeks for a team sport. In individual sports like gymnastics and other kinds of sports that require a little bit more individual attention, it's 26 weeks. So again, if it's a 30-week academic calendar, how many of those weeks do you really want to be fully invested in your sport?
Yes, great comment. Thanks for adding that. That's a great piece of information. Well, in this light, I'm going to bring up the next question here. And this one is also from a parent saying, if you had one question to ask a college coach that would be a deal breaker for you, what would it be?
I'd really want to know about the support system that exists around the program. And the reason being is that there are some programs that really have robust, mental health, nutrition support, strength and conditioning, position-specific coaches. And there are others who say they have it, but when it comes down to it, it's really not there. It exists for some of the other teams in your space, but it doesn't exist because your team falls lower on the pecking order. It's really important to make sure that the promises matches up with the reality. And I think sometimes coaches who are in that less resourced program are trying to be as competitive as they can so they can prove that they need more resources. And so it's not like they're trying to be deliberately deceitful. They're just trying to hopefully get better recruits that then they can go to the administration and say, see, we're winning now. Now we need all kinds of, support in this situation. So I guess that's what I pay most attention to.
I think that's great. You let's face it, when somebody visits a campus, I was a college coach, you were a college coach, you lay out the red carpet, especially if you want that athlete. And so you accentuate all of the positive and, and even bring out the best, players who get along the most or who are most social or whatever, on the visits. And you kind of keep other things or the negative things maybe about your program, you keep them under wrap. And, I think those are the things that, if you're not meeting all the players, if you're not seeing all the facilities and all those sorts of things, to me, those are flags. And part of that is who's supporting my daughter, who will be working with them. And are you meeting the head trainer, or are you meeting the men's trainer, or are you meeting the person that's going to work with your daughter? And sometimes you need to ask to really get to know the questions about support. They may just put the person who's the best, who can describe it the best. And those people may not ever touch your daughter's career.
Exactly. Yeah.
When you look at a campus, most of what you see is curb appeal. Okay, that's what I was just talking about. So this may be I'm sorry if I'm asking your question. How do we get to the real truths about campus, the program, and the college coaches? So sort of like what I was just saying. How do we know the truth?
Well, I think one of the best places to start is with the student newspaper. I mean, all the student newspapers are online right now. You get a sense of what's going on the campus. And, quite frankly, there are some campuses where the athletic department is beloved, and on other campuses where the athletic department is in conflict with the academic side of the university all the time. Mm-hmm. So just getting a sense for the tone and tenor of how athletics is viewed on the campus, I think would be really important. Certainly, there are more than enough chat boards and chat places and Instagram posts and things like that where you can track on some of the inside stuff that goes on positively and negatively. I think that if you can pay attention to how long people are staying in some of those positions, if they've been there a long time, you get a sense that there's some continuity in the programs. And you get a sense that, okay, we sort of have a rhythm here, like one staff, they could be together for 15 years, so they know each other's strengths and weaknesses and things like that. And if there's constant turnover at the assistant level, that could be a red flag. It doesn't mean it is. It could be that the job doesn't pay enough. It could be for a variety of reasons, but, so it's good to pay attention to how long people stick around, and that says something about the environment the institution wants to create around that program. So those are a couple of suggestions.
Yeah, there's and your situation might bring about more questions than another person's situation. It's all about your needs and your values and your daughter's, the things that she's looking for. Hopefully she's driving the process. And hopefully she's shared these things so that everybody knows how to point her to the things that she needs to see in order to make an informed decision. So, just recently, just very recently, even last week, there has been this talk, Karen, about the NIL. Can you explain that to our attendees? Because this is going to happen this summer, is taking effect. And so everybody that's watching this webinar or this conversation, you're going to be affected by this. Yeah. So can you explain what's coming?
Okay, so NIL stands for names, images, and likenesses. And the best way I can explain that is to use an example. Let's say that Gatorade asked me, gee, Karen, you drink a lot of Gatorade. Would you be willing to endorse our product? And we'll give you some money to put it on your Twitter feed, to put it on your Instagram page, to maybe do a TikTok video, that type of thing. And I would go, sure, what's the problem? No big deal for me. Everybody else on a college campus, from the faculty to the president to a regular student, can do that today, but a student athlete can't. The NCAA took away that right years ago and basically said, nope, sorry, there's too many possible conflicts of interest here, not only for you, but for us in terms of how we would manage this. Well, it has risen to the point now where 5 states, as of July 1st, are saying to the NCAA, we don't care about your rules, but we're going to let every one of our 4-year college athletes make money off their name, image, and likeness starting July 1. There's another 11 states that are coming shortly after that. But really what's happening is there are a number of people in front of senators and representatives in Congress asking for a national answer, a federal law, so that they can have standard guidelines about how to implement this. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And right now, everything's pointing to July 1st, which is literally 5.5 weeks away. And athletes will now have the same rights and opportunity as every other musician and artist and creative thinker and entrepreneur on campus. So if you think about what this means for athletes, I'll use an example. You got a #1 women's basketball player in the country, Paige Bueckers, who plays for the University of Connecticut. She won the Naismith Trophy this past year as a freshman. She's phenomenal. She has about 773,000 followers on Instagram and Twitter right now. The average number being assigned to that value, if she were to promote something like Gatorade, is 80 cents per follower. So Paige next year could make $665,000. And that's if she has it for all 3, 4, 5 years, that is life-changing wealth, not only for the athlete, but for the family. And that's just one example. If you look at some of these other players who have larger, followings, that's just one variation of trying to determine what's called fair market value. And that's what can I get in the marketplace for doing a Gatorade ad. So that's exactly what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up a female name, because when this first started coming out, it was brought up by football players, I think, and who were saying they weren't getting enough food and those sorts of things. And they were the football. And football gets, if you're going to get something on a campus, football usually gets it. And female sports are a little bit different. So when, as you say that, you're talking NAIA female student athletes, you're talking junior college, everybody can do this. And so, and I think you shared a story about a volleyball player, NAIA volleyball player, but so you're not going to be locked in anymore. And if you think about it, I mean, a lot of female student athletes have more following than
Yes.
than male athletes, and they
Yes.
they give more time to social media. So this could really be a change, and an interesting change, coming soon.
Let me just add one other piece to this too, because, and I'm sure Barb has shared this with all of you, but not every athlete gets a full scholarship, right? There's lots of partial scholarships out there, which means that the family has to somehow make up the difference. And that's at every level. And one of the reasons I have been so supportive of the NIL, setting aside the technology and the social media and all that type of thing, is because it's a very big concern for families these days, how much student debt their daughter or son is going to graduate with. And it should be, because it can limit your ability to get a car, buy a house, start a family, all those kinds of things. So for that reason alone, the NIL is a really important opportunity. And it makes total sense that an athlete will want to try to leverage it as much as possible, because they have their hours taken up by athletics 6 days a week, up to 4 hours a day, for up to 22 weeks a year in Division I. And so when are they going to have time to go work at the coffee shop or to go, work at the donut shop? They're not going to have that kind of time, but they are very skilled in telling stories on their social media, and they can translate that to reducing their student debt. So I think that's an important consideration for parents.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing, we kind of talked about this before we started here, but if you're a very good athlete, and you are Division I, or you're not, let's say, but you are, you don't want to spend the 30 weeks, of training and all that. but the Division 3, the ticket is so high, the price is so high. This really opens the door
Yeah.
for, that kind of a deal that you don't have to go Division 1 anymore. It really evens it out a little bit, or you can and still make that money on top of your scholarship. But it's really going to change things, I think.
There's other, negatives to it too. One of the things is you may have to keep track of money for tax purposes. So you're going to have to understand what the financial implications are of making that money. There's a battle right now in the NCAA about whether all of this will run through a third party who will then monitor for all the NCAA compliance rules and the appropriateness of competing sponsors. Let's say your school's a Nike team, but you get an offer from Adidas. So, how do we manage all of that? So you've got potentially that you might have somebody take 10% off the top or 15% off the top to pay for that compliance structure. All of this has yet to be determined, but parents who are aware of this are already chomping at the bit because they're seeing the potential in their sons or daughters.
And you were mentioning this too about some colleges preparing early for this and having programs within the university to and we'll just spend another minute on this because I know we have other questions, but this is so
Yeah.
important because this could determine where you want to go.
This idea of creating your brand is going to be a tool that coaches are going to use to try to attract athletes to their campuses. And just today, Duquesne announced that they are hiring a personal brand coach for each athlete, not one person for each athlete, but one for the entire department, whose job it is to help the athlete do the best job of telling stories, present their personal characteristics in the best way. On the 150 miles away in Columbus, Ohio, Ohio State just announced a major endowed leadership institute for all 1,000 athletes, called the Eugene M. Smith Leadership Institute. And it'll be all about learning the educational ideas behind it and how to become an entrepreneur in your own brand.
Could they get credit for that? Could they get credit for those?
I don't think so. I think that they would have to have the academic side of the house, but there have been one credit courses that have been offered in athletics for like financial literacy, so they may move in that direction at some point, but at least not initially.
We have a question that's come in regarding this, and the attendee says, "Why do you think this is applicable for athletes in states other than the 4 named? Is there a chance that a student athlete might get in hot water to do this before there's a federal standard?"
Yeah, it's a great question. And Mark Emmert came out, he's the president of the NCAA, was asked that very question in Florida last week because Florida's bill is differently timed. And he said, we're going to grandfather everybody in. We're just going to kind of let everybody do their own thing and then we'll work our way back out of it. So no, you can't have California or New York or Florida or other states allowing their athletes to do this, and across the state line in Pennsylvania they can. It will be unenforceable.
Oh, it's going to be crazy if that's the case. It'll be crazy. Wow. Well, do you see any other changes that are that drastic that are coming down the pike for college sports?
Yes, and we may hear it by the end of June. And the NCAA right now is in front of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court heard arguments back in March with regards to the way the NCAA rules are set up and whether the NCAA is in violation of antitrust laws because of the way they set up the amateurism standards. And I won't bore your audience with all the details, but it's very possible that either nothing could happen or everything could change because the Supreme Court could rule that the NCAA's laws are restricting trade. So that is another huge bombshell that's dropping in the middle of this.
So I'm going to just add my own question here.
Sure.
Where do you see college sports going?
If
I
only
could another whole
knew.
topic, I know, but like short answer.
It's up for serious disruptive change. There's going to be a lot of choppy waters. I quite frankly am not surprised to see the number of retirements that I'm seeing because I think there are people who are just said, you know what, this is too much in one. And I also don't think that senior campus leaders, people who are like presidents and vice presidents of student affairs, truly understand yet what's about to happen on their campus. And so their ability to react and quickly pivot and understand it is going to be challenged quite a bit in this, so they can monitor it from a campus perspective.
Yeah, that's really, it's kind of, it's interesting that I'm not in college sports right now because there's so many changes. It's amazing.
It is. It's remarkable.
Well, I'm going to go to the next question because we have several more here, but I appreciate that on the whole NIL, because it's really it's going to affect everybody. It's just going to
Yeah.
affect everybody, no matter what level, no matter what sport. It's just going to affect everybody, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. So moving on, how do you really know if a college supports the women's program?
Hmm. So you can start with data, and the Department of Education has an Equity in Athletics Disclosure Act. It's called the EADA, and it's required every year. Each college at every level fill it out and report the total amount of money that uses to support the men's sports, total amount of money used to support the women's sports, average head coaches' salaries in men's and women's, assistant coaches' salaries, how many athletes are on scholarship on the men's side, how many athletes are on scholarship on the women's side. And you get a really rough idea. And chances are, if a school has a football program, there's going to be a wide disparity, because football just sort of throws the 100-pound dumbbell in the middle of the room because it costs so much money.
Yeah.
So, Barb, I know you know, Title IX doesn't say they have to be equal, they have to be equitable. So the idea is to collectively look at the experience on the men's side and then collectively look at the experience on the women's side. And do they match up? It's not necessarily basketball to basketball team or soccer to soccer team. It's are these 80 athletes on the women's side getting a similar experience to the 80 athletes on the men's side? And so at least with the EADA, and you can access it online, it's free. Just Google Department of Education EADA and type in the name of the school that you're interested in, and just start reading the data. That's a great place to start.
Yeah, that's great information. I'll definitely make sure that that's on our website to share that information. But let's say you've done that, and let's say you're on campus. Is there anyone to talk to about that? Because sometimes you might feel like it's the elephant in the room, or it's the bad question, or no, we're not going to take that student athlete because her parents asked these dumb questions. How can they, is there somebody to go to find out, or are there signs on campus?
Well, if you've done your homework before you go to the campus, and you'll look at it, and I will give you a large, not well kept secret. Almost every college program in the country is out of compliance with Title IX. So you will, if you find 5 schools in the country that are equal with everything they do, that will be amazing. So there will be some deficit somewhere. So rather than putting an AD or a coach on the defensive, you can say, holistically, how do you think the women athletes are treated as compared to the men, rather than how is this team treated to this team? Because that's not how Title IX is measured. So if you want to ask questions about per diems, you want to ask questions about, do we stay 2 to a hotel room or 4 to a hotel room? Do we travel in a van or a bus? Do we charter, or do we do commercial? That will help you get an idea of some of the ways they're spending their money.
Yeah, that's great. Those are great answers. And it is unnerving, really, when you're going on campus and you really, it's like getting married. You don't really know the person until you're with them for a while, and in the recruitment process, it's hard to be with them for a while because you're not there. So I surveyed a bunch of college coaches a few years back and said, when do you really get to know your student athletes? And they said after 1 to 2 years.
Yeah,
So
I would agree with that.
A lot of people might have transferred already, because it wasn't a good fit, but you really, it's hard to know these things beforehand.
And stuff happens. I mean, I've had a couple of athletes in my coaching career where something serious happens medically in their freshman year, and that just sort of upends the their whole orientation and their expectations for their experience. And then you don't necessarily see them as an athlete. You see them as somebody who's trying to get back to being an athlete. And I'm sure you feel the same way, but that becomes our identity. And so that really upsets the apple cart as to how do I fit in with the rest of the group.
Right. Yeah. That when athletes are injured too, they're over there on the side trying to keep up, and sometimes they are forgotten, and that does affect experiences. And that is something that you can see if you go watch practices. What is happening with the injured athletes? Is there a trainer working with them? Are they engaged in practice? Are they sitting over there, eating a popsicle or something? It's what are they doing?
And who's in charge of their surgery, their recovery, and the rehab? And Barb, I know you know this. You witnessed it in your career. I've certainly seen it in mine. But more often than not, the football team gets the full-time doctor, the full-time trainer, the full-time physical therapist, and the other sports can oftentimes be left with the graduate assistant, the one who's learning.
Exactly.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because there's some wonderful people, but they still have to check in with everything that they're doing, and that could have an impact on how quickly you rehab.
Yes, that's a great point, Karen. Okay, so with all the progress, women's sports has come a long way.
Yep, sure has.
This is an actual question. So she says, or he says, my mother did not have the opportunities that I had, and my daughter has more opportunity than I had when I was a college athlete. With all the progress that women's athletics have made, why do I feel like we are still so far from our male counterparts? The huge discrepancies that just happen in all the national championships is what they're referring to.
2 reasons. One, media dollars, right? Because who do we put on TV? Primarily football and men's basketball. Women's basketball is coming on, but that's primarily, so the understanding has been, well, those are the teams that are making the media dollars for the rest of everybody else, so we need to pay the most attention to them. And then there's the second reason is there's been this eerie pattern, and it has been literally over 30 years, that for every $1 new that's given to a women's side of the ledger, $2 new go to the men's side. So it's like you're in this never-ending race of trying to keep up. And when I say dollars, I'm talking about everything from salaries to facilities to how teams travel to the number of games they play. All of these things have gone up for everybody, but it's just been almost at a pace of 2 to 1 for the men.
That is fascinating. And you said it's kind of happened every 30 years. You're saying this, right?
For the last 30 years, I mean, literally since the NCAA really started to invest in women's sports, conferences started to invest, quite frankly, in order to keep their male Olympic sport coaches happy, they had to invest in them equally as well. So all they were doing is just lifting the Olympic sports up. And in the meantime, because more and more television was coming, they were doubly investing and triply investing in football and men's basketball. In some places like Minnesota, men's hockey, that type of thing.
Yeah, so women's sports in general get 4% of the media attention.
At this point, but it's changing fast. It is really changing fast. I just saw ESPN PR tweeted out today that the ratings for the WNBA just in these last week and a half, the first week and a half of the season, are up 74% over last year this time. And they're up 45% from 2019 when it was a full regular season.
Yeah.
I mean, those are massive numbers in viewerships.
Yeah. That's great news too, because that's gonna, all that, I don't want to say trickle down, because down is not a good word, but it has effect on the other sports. So pros affect college affects high school, and et cetera.
Yep.
So that coverage then will be coming more so to college as well. Outside of the national championships, which are covered, pretty well. And now,
but they, as Sedona Prince was making a point with her TikTok video, we could do so much better in college sports.
That's right. You're going to have that now with social media. You're going to have people are going to be, calling out the disparity. So people have to work hard to, get their ducks in a row, so to speak.
And I would not have wanted to eat some of those meals either. So I totally understand it.
Yeah, I did see that. Many college coaches are telling us that you'll get the same education no matter which college you choose,
Hmm.
but you won't get the same athletic experience. So, what are your feelings on this? And should we make an athletic program's decision priority over academics?
Disagree. And now I will tell you, I was started off as a coach, and then I was an athletic director, and now I'm on the other side, the faculty side of things. And I can see the difference when a student really connects with the academic mission of the classes that they're taking and the faculty that they have. Faculty are there not just to teach the class and give you homework, but they're there to help you build connections in the industry or the career path that you want to go on. And at some point, the games are going to stop, whether it's after an injury or at the end of your eligibility. And so those faculty and that experience will be incredibly valuable for you. So I don't think you can write it off and say the athletic experience is what matters. I think they both equally matter. And I think you have to be just as conscious of seeking out information about the faculty you will have as mentors and teachers and recommendation writers and all those kinds of things as you are about your coaches. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think whoever told you that, whoever this person is that asked the question, that could be a flag for whoever told you that
Mhm,
information
mhm.
because, maybe academics isn't as important in that program. And I hate to say it that way, that, that may or may not be the case, but that is something to look into if they're saying, because maybe you're looking at an academic school that's more academic than theirs. And so they might be saying something like this to say, hey, it doesn't matter, even though we're not the same academic school, blah, blah, blah. We have another question that's coming, Karen. I want to get this to one of our listeners. Is the trend that female athletes would rather play for a male coaching or coach changing,
Oh,
particularly as you see more female coaches becoming influencers? Well, that's another very good question.
so I want to make sure I understand the question. So is the question that is the trend continuing that more men are coaching women's sports? Is that the question?
It says, is the trend that female athletes would rather play for a male
Okay.
coach changing?
Okay. So this is a battle. I mean, there is a school of thought that says that women athletes, if they've been coached by men most of their developmental career, whether it be AAU, club, travel ball, high school, that switching to a women head coach or a women coaching staff may or may not may be a difficult transition. They approach differently because women are different from men. I've known of some times when there's been a coaching search where the athletes have gone to the athletic director and said, we won't play for anybody else but man. And so that I think creates a very uncomfortable dynamic. Quite frankly, it's illegal to set that kind of parameter up and exclude one sex over the other. But I think part of this is helping athletes understand that it's about the person that you connect with rather than the gender that's going to be the good leader for that team. So I think that's a fairly narrow-minded approach, but it's not surprising because we have so few women in the youth leagues and coming through that it's not surprising they haven't seen very many women coaches. And we also don't have nearly as many women coaches coaching in the collegiate levels as we used to. My sport, field hockey, which used to be 99.9% females coaching the sport, is quickly morphing into 50% female, 45% female, because of the influx of male coaches, not only from the US, but from Europe and other places.
Oh,
They
yeah.
see opportunities to do it full time here. So that's the reason they're interested in it.
Yeah.
So I think it behooves athletic directors to be conscious of trying to be as inclusive as possible in their hiring pools, to look out for more talented people, to look under different places. Women traditionally don't seek a job unless they meet every point on the job description,
Right.
whereas men will see one and say, oh, well, then I'm qualified, I'm ready for that. And I'm laughing, but it's true. I know that when I was working at the University of Minnesota, we were looking for a head women's basketball coach. I literally got a letter handwritten from a male coach who said, I've had all the success I could ever have at this level. We're 96-0. I'm ready to take the next step. Signed, Joe Smith, 8th grade middle school coach. And he was dead serious. He said, I'm ready to make the jump from 8th grade middle school all the way up to Division I women's basketball. So
Wow.
there's this perception that is different from the genders.
Yeah, I did have a similar conversation when we were looking for an assistant coach at University of Minnesota, and I had a man, a young guy, call and say he was interested in the job, and that he was told by some of his male friends that you could move up faster on the women's side than you could on the men's side, and so that's why he was interested in the women's job.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, part of this other question, or part of the second part of this question is, particularly as you see more female coaches becoming influencers, do you think that might help the trend?
And I assume you're talking about people like Dawn Staley and Kim Mulkey and Brenda Fries and some of the others who have been longtime head coaches, have had high levels of success. And I'm just thinking of basketball at this point. But yeah, and my hope is, as people like Muffet McGraw have done, is they build a nice coaching tree right behind them.
Right.
So that you can say, hey, that's Muffet McGraw's top assistant, or that's Dawn Staley's top assistant who's moving into a head coaching role. It doesn't mean that the men shouldn't get that, but it's just there's been so few opportunities for women to be see the range of experiences on a coaching staff. And then also they've been closed out of the men's coaching. So where else are they supposed to get the college experience except if someone gives them that opportunity?
Yeah. Yeah. So in an overview picture, do you think, or how do you think gender equity is working?
We have a lot of issues. I was literally listening to a webinar today with college presidents, and everybody talks a really good game about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's all of this is racial, gender, sexual orientation, all of that matters. But we still consistently in college athletics go back to white males.
Mm.
And I think it's hard for women who might think about becoming a coach actually seeing a path into staying involved in college athletics. And we desperately need women to do that. The Tucker Center, which is a wonderful research organization at the University of Minnesota, has really looked at what is causing women to leave coaching. So many women get involved right out of undergraduate school. They're excited about it. They may even go get a master's degree. And then sometime around 26, 27, 28 years old, they drop out. And then they don't come back either because it's not viewed as being family friendly or there's too much traveling around the country. The University of Arizona women's basketball coach, Adia Barnes, this year was nursing her baby in the locker room at halftime.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to be really okay with that. And there's some departments that need to do better there.
Yeah. Yeah. Great examples there. Here's another one that is touchy, but you want to find out, especially with the whole Simone Biles and the whole gymnastics thing that happened with the trainer there.
Yeah.
How prevalent is sexual abuse in college sports? Parentheses, concerned parent of a female student athlete. How do I ask questions about this as we research colleges and college coaches, who are a lot now are male?
I don't have all the answers on this, but what I can tell you is that there's been enough of a awakening about this that there are a lot more laws on the books. The first thing I will say, and I'll speak for Pennsylvania because that's what I know, but that we have something called Act 48 laws, which require people to get background checked and to have fingerprints and annual training, and there has to be multiple adults in a room with students that are certain ages. That's a given now for many coaches who are hired, is they need to be subjected to this kind of thing. I do worry about that in lesser resourced institutions because it costs money to do those background checks. And not every search process results in somebody having a criminal background check or those kinds of things. So you end up relying on the head coach's relationship with that assistant coach and that type of thing. So I guess the conversation I would have is with other women in the department and say, if you have a good moment to say this, how safe do you feel here? How safe do you, if you felt like somebody was being inappropriate, do you feel like you could go to what channel would you go through here? And do you feel like you'd be listened to? And that way you're not calling anybody out, but you could just say, honestly, how do you feel as a woman, working here at 9 o'clock at night by yourself? How do you feel like you could leave and get safely to your parking lot? Or do you feel like if you were by yourself and something happened, who would you call? I hate to say that's where we are, but in some situations that is where we are.
Yeah. And, we used to tell our student athletes, even with not heavy, abuse issues around campus, to always be with somebody. Just
Yes.
because you just never know. Yeah.
Even if you're staying late in the training room and you have to get back to your residence hall, a little bit later and it's dark, make sure, ask somebody to hang around and walk back with you. I mean, it's just that kind of stuff,
Yeah, some of them have escort services. Some colleges
Yeah.
have some escort services and things that you can use. But yeah, you might have study halls late and training and all of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess being careful and cognizant and having a buddy system as much as possible.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I say especially for females, but even for males, I think I would say the same thing nowadays.
Absolutely.
on campuses. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So who holds colleges accountable to be in compliance with gender equity, with discrimination, with all the different things that we've sort of touched on tonight?
So there are a couple things. Of course, there's federal, state, and local legislation. So every college has to attest that they are in compliance with those things. And if they're not, and as something's brought to their attention, that's the first thing they'll be asked by the lawyers. Were you in compliance? If not, why weren't you in compliance? And what steps are you going to take to get into compliance? If it gets really bad and you have systemic problems on your campus, your college's accreditation could be impacted. Accreditation means you have the seal of approval for allowing your students to take out federal student loans. If somebody wants to come to your school and can't take out a federal student loan, you're out of business. So it's a really important stamp of approval. Once every 10 years, they come in and reaccredit you. And they look at all of these things, including academics and student life and all that type of thing. But things can go undetected for a long period of time. So for the last 15 years now, there's been a Title IX officer on campus. And originally that person started maybe as somebody who oversaw the gender equity in athletics. But that has really now morphed into sexual assault, sexual harassment, trying to decide in cases where who assaulted whose rights were violated. So that office has taken on more of a sexual harassment kind of focus versus the gender equity kind of focus. There has been some pushback on campus outside of the athletics program about the athletics department having their own Title IX person. Because traditionally what has happened is when athletics has a direct line, let's say to the campus police, they find out a way to keep it out of the campus police log. Right. They find out a way to keep it out of the upper administration's kind of way. And that has to stop. But I understand because they don't want the publicity. They don't want the kid to be thrown in jail. They don't want all that kind of stuff. But in reality, for the same reason that you don't want that's the same reason you want the outside person to come in and make a determination, because you don't want the rights infringed upon of the athlete who was assaulted or harassed by the person who did the assaulting or harassed, or you don't want them falsely accused either.
That makes sense. Yeah. And if we're going to be like the student population in NIL and all the other things, then we should be with the same thing with all the other stuff, the police reports and everything. We should be like the normal student population and not have things under the, special treatment in certain areas and not others and those sorts of things. If it's across the board, it just should be just across the board.
If student athletes are truly students first, then they ought to be disciplined appropriately as any other student was. And this is one of the problems that Penn State got into a decade ago with former head football coach Joe Paterno, is that his stature rose so great on the campus that if a student football player committed a violation in the residence halls or something else, the coach was able to remove that student from the student judicial process and say he's going to run stadium steps. That's what we're going to make him do. That's the penalty he's going to pay. And that's not fair, because another student on campus is being kicked out of school. You know, that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in a similar vein, I talked to a student athlete who said that had she known that this university, I'm not going to say her name or the university because it's a big university. It's a Power 5 university. Had she known that it was that racist on campus, she probably would not have gone there.
Yeah.
Even though the program itself was, understanding and the coach was great and all that, but the campus itself was very racist. So how do I find out about racism in college leadership and college coaches?
So are you asking me about racism within the team, the department, the campus, the community?
College leadership would lead me to believe that they're talking about the university, and then college coaches as well. College coaches, I would think, would be a little bit easier because there'll be a little bit more contact. But how do I find out about racism in college leadership?
So this is sort of an out of the box idea, but I'm going to suggest it because it's what I would do. Okay, it's what I would do. I would look at the majors that are being taught and the kinds of environment that those majors are being taught in. For example, there's a real battle on right now from politically about this idea of critical race theory, which is basically saying that the way African Americans and other people of color view things is equally as valuable as the way white people look at things, that we can agree to have two different narratives. It's a very simplistic way of looking at critical race theory, but you get the idea. And so if that concept, and that's one of many, is being taught on campus without any interference from administration, from trustees, from key donors, that type of thing, I'd say you have a reasonable chance that campus is pretty affirming and opening. But like what's going on certain campuses right now, there's a huge uproar going on at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, because a journalist who did an incredible New York Times series called the 1619 Project, which was about how Africans came to this country in 1619 and the 400 years of how African Americans have been treated. She was asked to join the faculty, and then suddenly at the last minute, the trustees ripped away from her the ability to get tenure. And they can figure for no other reason other than the fact that it was her politics and it was the way she was interpreting race. That should tell you something when
right.
that kind of thing happens.
Right. Yeah. And I think, like you're saying this, I think high school student athletes, I know this from my own experience with them right now, are way more in tune with politics than when I was coming through high school. And
absolutely.
So this whole racial injustice thing has really hit home on a lot of people, females, be it white or black or Asian. I mean, there's a heaviness for some of these young females to try to navigate that whole thing when they're just trying to play sports and go to school. So there is a lot of that angst, when they're now going away from home and they're on campuses, and there's different issues, I guess, than there have been in the past, maybe, or they're more exposed than they used to be. And I think it does affect a decision to go to campus. So they do need to find these things out, whatever their beliefs and values and needs are. They've got to try to find ways to figure that out.
Just take the issue of kneeling, right? Colin Kaepernick started kneeling, and then other teams in support at all levels, high school all the way down to pro, wanted to support him. And the blowback from that continues to this day when certain members of the team and the entire team, let's say it's a high school team that wants to kneel, there are people in the community who will be very upset about that. And that kind of thing happens on college campuses too.
Right. I want to get to two more questions. So this could be sort of like a rapid fire because we're coming to a close here. But
Okay.
um, in your best uh, answer, and I need to speed up the question, right? Um, how do the different levels affect the college experience? So D1, D2, NAIA, in your sense, how do they, with a college sport and academics, how do they differ mostly?
Mostly it's about finding the best possible fit for you. It really doesn't matter whether you call it's called a Division 3 or Division 1 experience. You can have a horrible experience in Division 1, a great experience in Division 3. It's about finding the best place that connects and meets your goals. And that's the simplest way I can answer that.
That's a great answer. That's a great
Yeah.
answer. And you're right. And you kind of just did a promo for Find My Team because we are all about finding fit over everything else. And sometimes that piece of it is left out. So, okay, I gotta stop that one short and get to this last one because this is also a good question that has come in. For my daughter who wants to be a coach in the future, how can she best prepare herself? And the picture seems a bit bleak. What are the great things about working in athletics and about being a student athlete?
Well, I've been doing it for almost 40 years. I hate to even admit that, but I love college athletics. There's so much about competing. There's great things about game day. It's certainly every day is a challenge. I loved coaching my athletes. I loved coaching my coaches. I really felt like working with coaches was a real blessing. So if you can find a mentor in the process who has the passion that you want to have, stay with them. I think that will help you overcome any of those hurdles. And there is so much change happening in coaches associations right now. The recognize that diversity, equity, inclusion actually means something. So we've got to attract more people of color to coaching. We've got to attract more women to coaching. So I think we're coming into a prime time for more women to step up and say, I want to be a coach.
Well, let's hope that happens because when I got in, kind of like when you got in, it was mostly women. And
Yes,
you don't want to lose that. And there's slowly the men's side is opening the doors, so we're starting to get it, and hopefully that will be, in 10 years may not even be talking about this because there'll be so many more women. 10 years might be a little ambitious, but I'm hoping that the doors will open on the other side too, so that there is this, this a little bit more, equal opportunity there.
well,
Karen,
just look at all the women who have gone into professional front office positions. We have general managers and we have assistant coaches at the professional level. So that's going to trickle down.
yeah, yeah, and those people then some are making the decisions also and
Correct.
raising the bar. Yeah, absolutely. Karen, I'm so bummed that we're out of time because I could talk for hours to you because you're just so knowledgeable about college sports. So at some point in the future, we'll bring you back, especially after all this stuff gets going. It'd be interesting because I know you'll be following it pretty much on key. So thank you very much. Thanks to all of our attendees, and for anyone that wants to watch this again, it'll be on the website very soon. And Karen, your time has been invaluable. Your knowledge is extensive. It's amazing. And don't forget the podcast, everyone. Karen, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Barb.